Good morning and welcome to the April 2022 ICIT Cyber Legislation and Federal Initiatives webcast. My name is Drew Spaniel and I'm the lead researcher here with ICIT. If this is your first time joining us, or if you're unfamiliar with the Institute for Critical Infrastructure Technology, we're a nonprofit 501c3 focused on vendor agnostic, nonpartisan, and objective research. Our mission is to cultivate a cybersecurity renaissance that will improve the resiliency of our nation's 16 critical infrastructure sectors, defend our democratic institutions, and empower generations of cybersecurity leaders. You can engage with ICIT via our events, our newsletter, such as our e-blast, on social networks like LinkedIn, and via our website. ICIT individual members receive analyst reports corresponding to this briefing that include greater details for both the legislation and the agency initiatives that will be covered today. Here's an example of what the legislative report looks like. As you can see, it includes a description as well as some reference links. Jumping in, we have around 40 agency initiatives to cover today and about 21 pieces of legislation. So we're going to move a little bit fast to be respectful of everyone's time. CISA and the NCSC have issued an advisory on the most exploited cybersecurity vulnerabilities. The advisory was created by an alliance of intelligence agencies from Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom, otherwise known as Five Eyes, and it warned organizations to apply timely patches and implement a centralized patch management system to reduce the risk of compromise from the most common cyber vulnerabilities exploited by malicious cyber criminals in 2021 and 2020. The report also includes an additional 21 vulnerabilities that were exploited from 2017 until 2020. The advisory included the 15 most exploited vulnerabilities and featured a maximum severity examples such as the Log4 shell vulnerability and the Apache Log4 open source logging framework, and CVE 2021-44-22-8, which can be remotely exploited by hackers, allowing the execution of arbitrary code that gives them full control of a vulnerable system. CISA advised organizations to patch against the vulnerabilities, and they included a list of mitigations that make it harder for threat actors to exploit these and other vulnerabilities. CISA Director Jen Easterly defended the 2023 fiscal year budget in front of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security. The requested budget amounts to $2.5 billion, which is 18% more than the requested fiscal year 2022 budget. And she has been quoted in numerous outlets as stating that defending that the funding needs for CISA will increase in proportion to evolving threats if CISA hopes to be able to meet its goal of securing the nation's cyber defenses. A large portion of the proposed allocation includes about $1.5 billion for various cybersecurity programs and activities that enable CISA and its partners to detect, mitigate, and respond to threats, which has been a pillar of CISA's two-pronged strategy that revolves around defending government networks and securing the nation's critical infrastructure. Part of this portion includes $71 million for CISA's Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, or JCDC, launched last year, which brings together key government and private sector partners to build defense plans tackling ransomware, critical infrastructure security, and cloud security. The allocation also represents an $18 million increase for JCDC over the previous fiscal year. The budget proposals also supports $407 million for the National Cybersecurity Protection System, or NCPS, and $425 million for the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program, or CMD. Both programs aim to secure civilian executive branch agencies against threats. It included $73 million to expand the endpoint detection and response initiative across the executive branch departments and agencies, and to support efforts to provide visibility into adversary activity targeting federal networks. A further $174 million would allow CISA to expand its cybersecurity service offerings to protecting federal networks against cyber threats. $175 million is allocated for efforts to enhance critical infrastructure protection, $115 million for National Risk Management Center, or NRMC, a program that brings together sector stakeholders to address top significant threats to critical infrastructure and to coordinate ways to reduce risk. $39 million for the Cyber Sentry program, which is a voluntary partnership with private sector critical infrastructure operators designed to detect malicious activity on the networks. $80 million for a cyber grant program that would help entities raise their cybersecurity baselines. And $80 million for FEMA's a FEMA program with CISA that would be a competitive grant program, and a complementary $1 billion that would go towards improving state and local cybersecurity. Moving on, in the middle of the month, CISA, the Department of Energy, FBI, and NSA warned that advanced persistent threat actors were exhibiting the capability to gain full system access to multiple industrial control systems and SCADA systems that are used in the oil and gas portion of the energy sector, particularly devices such as the Schneider Electric Programmable Logic Controllers, or PLCs, Omron Sysmac, Next PLCs, and Open Platform Communications Unified Architecture, or OPCUA servers. The APT actors have developed custom-made tools for targeting ICS SCADA devices, and the tools enable them to scan for, compromise, and control affected devices once they've established initial access to the operational technology network. Additionally, the actors can compromise Windows-based engineering workstations, which may be present in information technology or OT environments. Using an exploit that compromises an ASRock motherboard driver with known vulnerability by compromising the maintaining full system access to ICS SCADA devices, APT actors could elevate privileges, move laterally within an OT network, and disrupt critical devices and functions. The agencies urge critical infrastructure organizations, especially energy sector organizations, to implement detection and mitigation recommendations provided in the advisory to detect potential malicious APT activity and harden their devices against such attacks. CISA and the FBI have updated their February advisory on destructive malware targeting organizations in Ukraine to include additional indicators of compromise for the Whispergate malware and technical details for Hermeticgate, Isaac Wiper, and Hermetic Wizard, and the Caddy Wiper destructive malware, all of which have been deployed against Ukraine since January of 2022. It is believed that these malware could eventually target US systems. The agencies therefore advise US organizations to act to monitor and protect their networks. At the 2022 IAPP Global Privacy Summit in Washington, CISA Director Jen Easterly and FBI Special Agent Herb Stapleton both urged organizations to report cyber breaches to CISA and the FBI and promised to not use such reports as incentives for legal action against the companies. Both stressed that their agencies would not share breach report data with the FTC or SEC, but that increased reporting helps to defend sectors overall. FEMA is reportedly working closely with CISA to secure its IoT devices and systems. While FEMA has the active standing tools to mitigate major cybersecurity vulnerabilities, CISA has provided agencies with effective guidance while renewing focus on baseline security measures from ensuring Devices are immediately updated to the latest firmware to identifying and resolving vulnerabilities. CISA has released a score of guidance, technical materials, and tips when it comes to IoT, and the agency has published over 30 pages of IoT security acquisition guidance, produced a report on IoT undeniable impact on public safety communications, and features advice on how to secure IoT devices on its website. The FBI, CISA, and Treasury have issued a joint cybersecurity advisory to highlight the cyber threat associated with cryptocurrency thefts and tactics used by the North Korean state-sponsored APT known as Lazarus Group. It's also known as APT-38, Blue Norolf, and Stardust Lima, and a few other titles. The US government has observed cyber actors attributed to that group targeting a variety of organizations in the blockchain technology and cryptocurrency industry, including cryptocurrency exchanges, decentralized finance protocols, play-to-earn cryptocurrency video games, cryptocurrency trading companies, venture capital funds investing in crypto, and individual holders of large amounts of the cryptocurrency or valuable NFTs. The activity described in the advisory involves social engineering of victims using a variety of communication platforms to encourage individuals to download Trojanized cryptocurrency applications on Windows or Mac OS operating systems. The cyber actors then use the applications to gain access to the victim's system, propagate malware across their network, steal private keys, or exploit other security gaps in order to gain access to those resources. CISA plans to expand the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, or JCDC, to include industrial control systems, or ICS, and operational technology, OT, experts. CISA formed the JCDC in August 2021 to unify defensive actions and drive down risk in advance of cyber incidents. The public-private sector partnership already includes 211 private sector alliance partners that include AT&T, Verizon, VMware, IBM, Google Cloud, and AWS, among others. New members of the JCDC ICS initiative would include experts from Clarity, Siemens, GE, Honeywell, Bechtel, and others. Moving on, the DoD has published its report in response to last year's Executive Order 14017, or Securing America's Supply Chains. We touched on this report back on our February 2022 Legislative and Agency Initiatives briefing, but the full report was not publicly available. It now is. Individual members will receive in their reports for this month a very long write-up or summary of this report that's included in the legislative briefing. We're going to touch on some of the high notes with this summary. The report, entitled Securing Defense Critical Supply Chains, assesses supply chain in the defense industrial base and sets out DoD's plan to align its priorities and capabilities to strengthen the industrial base and to establish a network of domestic and allied supply chains to meet network security needs. It proposes a series of specific recommendations across several DoD focus areas and strategic enablers, and provides an update on the implementation of DoD's strategic review of critical minerals and materials published in June 2021. It builds on prior reports, legislative proposals, and recent executive orders. It also provides DoD's current analysis of DIB supply chain challenges and includes recommendations to strengthen and enhance the resiliency of the supply chain. Finally, it provides insight on where to expect increased government investments, as well as potential changes in procurement regulations and policies. The Icit Summary goes through the focus areas, the strategic enablers detailed in the report. It touches on some of the 64 recommendations, both foundational, focus, and enabler recommendations, and some additional information. The Pentagon is assessing whether to develop cloud service offerings to help contractors meet requirements for its cyber certification program, according to David McKeown, the Defense Department's Deputy Chief Information Officer and Senior Information Security Officer. At an April 2022 AFCEA Cyber Mission Summit, he said that he is looking for innovative solutions to help contractors meet at least 85 out of the 110 controls specified in Nist Special Publication 800-171 in order to achieve certification required for Level 2 CMMC. Nearly 300 security researchers from bug bounty vendor HackerOne participated in the 12-month exercise entitled the Defense Industrial Base Vulnerability Disclosure Program, or DIB-VDP pilot. And they made around a little over 1,000 reports, which examined vulnerabilities in the networks of participating defense contractors. Of those, eliminating non-critical and repeat reports, about 400 vulnerabilities were deemed actionable and required remediation. The pilot effort, run in coordination with the Defense Cyber Crime Center and the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, began with 14 companies and 141 public-facing assets. It was then expanded to include 41 entities and 348 systems over the course of this year. The program figures represent just a small portion of the estimated 100 to 300,000 companies that contract directly with the Pentagon and its components. So for scale purposes, they found 400 vulnerabilities in 300 defense contractor systems, but those only belong to 41 entities. That's 41 entities out of an estimated 300 up to 300,000 in the DIB space. So you can extrapolate that as you see fit. The U.S. Defense Information Systems Agency has indicated that it intends to continue work on prioritize the security of its classified networks in the coming months as it experiments with a zero trust prototype that is referred to as Thunderdome. DISA recently awarded a 6-month prototypical Thunderdome contract to Booz Allen Hamilton and spent the last 3 to 4 months on a journey of discovery of its complex networks. One of the findings included the need to move more quickly on implementing zero trust on the Secret Internet Protocol Router Network, or SIPRN net, while implementing the cybersecurity solution on its non-classified Internet Protocol Router Network known as NIPR net. The agency is initially testing the Thunderdome solution at DISA headquarters and with DISA offices in its Indo-Pacific region and with joint service providers in the Pentagon. They expect to begin with about 40 users on NIPR.net and expand to about 2,500 users at the 2 DISA sites and approximately 400 in the Pentagon. Thunderdome would likely remain in its first phase until this fall before transitioning to a formal operational testing later in the year, where all aspects of the systems are supported and evaluated until around January of next calendar year. Afterward, DISA would have to make a fielding decision in terms of whether to take the capability to a larger scale or offer the service to military services or combatant commands where expansion might be necessary. According to the FBI, the Black Hat ransomware gang, which is said to be the first known ransomware group to successfully break into networks using Rust-ridden malware as opposed to C or C++, have attacked at least 60 organizations globally as of March. According to reports from Cisco's Talos network and Palo Alto's Uno 42, Black Hat may be affiliated or derivative of the Black Matter or Dark Side ransomware groups, which are attributed with the Colonial Access Pipeline attack last year. The ransomware as a service operation, also known as Alpha V, was launched around November 2021 and typically targets large organizations and demands ransom payments of several $1 million in Bitcoin or Monero. If the ransom is not paid, threats are then issued to publish stolen data on a leak site. The ransomware group typically leverages previously compromised user credentials to gain initial access to its victim systems, establishes persistence to compromise and then compromises Active Directory or administrative accounts. So sort of a stereotypical playbook. Definitely, do your due diligence to make sure that your user accounts aren't compromised, so that for any attacker, not just Black Hat, you are not lowest hanging fruit, as they say. The FBI has also issued a warning informing food and agriculture sector partners that ransomware actors may be more likely to attack agricultural cooperatives during critical planting and harvest seasons, which would disrupt operations, cause financial losses, and negatively impact the food supply chain. The FBI noted that ransomware attacks during these seasons against 6 grain cooperatives during the fall 2021 harvest and 2 attacks in early 2022 that could impact the planting season by disrupting the supply of seeds and fertilizer. Cyber actors may perceive cooperatives as lucrative targets with a willingness to pay due to time-sensitive role that they play in the agricultural production process. Keep in mind that agriculture is not just necessary for our basic crops, it also is used to feed our livestock and for other purposes. Although ransomware attacks against the entire farm-to-table spectrum of the sector occur on a regular basis, the number of cyber attacks against agricultural cooperatives are notable during key seasons. It should also be noted, as ICIT will likely be discussing in an upcoming publication, that given current geopolitical tensions and conflicts, agriculture is likely to be a prime target for cyber attacks in the next year. In November of 2021, the FDIC, Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System and Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, issued a final rule to establish computer security incident notification requirements for banking organizations and their service providers. Part of the implementation of that final rule was delayed until April 1st, and the full implementation was delayed until May 1st of 2022. As of the time of this recording, the full implementation of the rule is now in effect. The new rule will inform agencies of emerging threats to banking organizations and the financial system, including potential systemic cyber breaches. Under the new rules, banks and other financial institutions will be required to notify the FDIC as soon as possible and no later than 36 hours after they learn of an incident. The new rule defines a computer security incident as an occurrence that results in actual harm to the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of an information system or the information that the system processes, stores, or transmits. The rule also requires a banking service provider to notify the bank designated point of contact of any computer security incident that is disrupted or degraded or is likely to disrupt or degrade the banking organization for 4 hours or more. The General Services Administration is partnering with the Federal CIO Council to develop and release 6 Zero Trust playbooks in the coming months, which are focused on implementation methods, fundamentals, and base capabilities of establishing a Zero Trust architecture, identity, device, network applications, and other areas associated with Zero Trust. Again, keep an eye out for those sometime in the next few months. The GSA has also released a very short window RFI, which has already concluded, that indicates their intention to conduct a massive study around commercial facial recognition technology to determine if it can be incorporated into login.gov, the federal government's primary identity service for interacting with public-facing federal websites. The agency issued the RFI for about a week, asking for interested third-party researchers to conduct a remote identity proofing study that would include around 2,000 testers and cover multiple vendors in the commercial facial recognition space. The project is expected to help determine if identity verification capabilities, including facial verification, meet equity standards across various demographics. It wants to assess whether or not there are biases in the algorithms, so on and so forth. It will also help determine whether GSA will incorporate such technologies into login.gov, a secure sign-on tool for Americans to access their information on federal websites and applications. The Department of Health Human Services is seeking public comments until about June 6th, 2022, about the appropriate role of recognized security practices in the enforcement of the HIPAA security rule. Congress, through an amendment to HITECH, is requiring the agency to take into consideration certain recognized security practices when determining potential enforcement outcomes for HIPAA-regulated entities subject to audit or investigation for violations of the security rule. The RFI provides an opportunity for stakeholders to help define which security frameworks and practices will be recognized in the context of enforcement of the security rule. Additionally, the agency is seeking comment on developing methodology by which it could distribute some of the funds collected through HIPAA enforcement actions to affected individuals. Again, comments are due to HHS by June 6th, 2022. The HHS Office of Inspector General has unfortunately again deemed HHS's information security program ineffective with regards to FISMA metrics. The findings are consistent with past audits from the OIG and the GAO which have deemed the security controls ineffective. OIG's determination was based on HHS not meeting the managed and measurable maturity level for the 5 out of 5 of the identity protect, detect, and recover function elements required by DHS guidance and FISMA. The performance audit was conducted by EY in compliance with the FISMA and government auditing standards using the Nist cybersecurity framework as guidance. The HHS cybersecurity program operates with a shared responsibility model, acknowledging HHS operating divisions and contractors as critical to risk management. OIG assessed HHS's maturity for its supply chain risk management, information security, continuous monitoring, and continuancy planning at level 2, whereas defined. Its risk management, configuration management, identity and access management, data protection and privacy, security training, and incident response at maturity 3. And specifically, OIG determined that progress hadn't been achieved in some of the metric areas due to a lack of implementation of information security continuous monitoring efforts across the operating divisions. You can read more about this in our write-up. However, HHS leadership have recognized these limitations and noted their primary goal to support its divisions with the implementation and monitoring tools recommended by DHS. So while this review may not have come as a surprise given previous audits, there were some promising advancements which indicate that HHS will soon shore up some of these deficiencies. HHS has issued a warning to healthcare organizations about the Hive ransomware threat. Hive is an exceptionally aggressive, financially motivated ransomware group that is known to maintain sophisticated capabilities and have historically targeted healthcare organizations. The HC3 of HHS recommends that the sector be aware of the operations and apply appropriate cybersecurity principles and practices in defense against of their infrastructure and data against compromise. Hive has been active since June 2021, but according to HHS, has been more active lately and targeting healthcare organizations with what they refer to as double extortion threats. The group is financially motivated and demands payment to unlock data it has encrypted, and also threatens to publicly release unencrypted data selling it on a name and shame dark website, according to the alert. The alert reminds healthcare organizations to protect themselves with continuous monitoring and active vulnerability management. It also suggests keeping backups of data in multiple locations and using multi-factor authentication and strong credentials. The Healthcare and Public Health Sector Coordinating Council is a coalition of private sector critical healthcare infrastructure entities organized under the National Infrastructure Protection Plan to partner with and advise the government on the identification and mitigation of strategic threats and vulnerabilities facing the healthcare sector's ability to deliver services and assets to the public. In April, the HSCC Cybersecurity Working Group released its Medtech Vulnerability Communications Toolkit, which advised medical device manufacturers to use clear and concise language in vulnerability communications, and was built upon the FDA's best practice guide for communicating medical device vulnerabilities to patients and caregivers, which the administration released in October of 2021. The working group also recently released a checklist to help healthcare staff and executives preserve operational continuity when recovering from a serious cyber attack. Healthcare organizations can use the Operating Continuity Cyber Incident, or OCCI, checklist to maintain business continuity even amid an extended enterprise outage. The checklist, created by the Incident Response and Business Continuity Task Group of the HSCC's working group, is meant to serve as a living document that can be altered based on stakeholder feedback and experience. As I'm sure many of you have heard, the Department of Homeland Security has indicated its intent to form a disinformation governance board that will focus on countering disinformation coming from Russia, as well as misleading information regarding human smugglers circulating and targeting migrants hoping to travel across the US-Mexico border. The Hack the DHS program, which was launched last December, has identified 122 vulnerabilities in its first phase. The bug bounty program permitted vetted security researchers and ethical hackers to probe select external DHS systems vulnerabilities with the potential to receive up to $5,000 for their fines. According to DHS, the agency awarded around $125,000 to researchers in the first of the 3 phases of the program. And around 72 of the 122 vulnerabilities discovered were deemed critical. Nist has released the public draft of its special publication 882R3, the Guide to Operational Technology Security, which provides guidance on how to improve the security of OT systems while addressing their unique performance, reliability, and safety requirements. The 3rd revision provides an overview of OT and typical system topologies, identifies typical threats to organizational mission and business functions supported by OT, describes typical vulnerabilities in OT, and provides recommended security safeguards and countermeasures to manage the associated risks. Updates in the revision include an expansion in scope from ICS to OT, updates to OT threats and vulnerabilities, updates to OT risk management recommended practices and architectures, updates to current activities in the OT security, and to security capabilities and tools for OT, additional alignment with other OT security standards and guidelines, including the cybersecurity framework, new tailoring guidance for Nist SP 853 Rev 5, and an OT overlay for 853 Rev 5 security controls that provides tailored security control baselines for low impact, moderate impact, and high impact systems. Nist is accepting comments on this draft until July 1st, 2022, and the members' write-up includes the email address to for which you should send those comments. You can also find that information online. Nist is also seeking comment through June 27th of 2022 on special publication 1833B, which describes how to address 5G security in the emerging computing environment and is aimed at network operators. Nist said one of the reasons it expects the publication to be useful is because standards associations have focused more on security at the interface of 5G components rather than on the components themselves, including the cloud infrastructure that it says is still new to many users. Nist is accepting comment again on the 5G security guidance until June 27th, 2022. A Nist official has indicated that the agency is poised to publish guidance for securing updated guidance for securing enterprises against supply chain hacks following incidents such as SolarWinds and other critical infrastructure attacks. The updates to SP 800-161 that were incorporated last year were designed to better help organizations identify, assess, and respond to cyber supply chain risks while still aligning with other fundamental NIST cybersecurity risk management's guidance. US Telecom, which is the trade association that represents the nation's largest internet service providers, has responded to the public comment for NIST cybersecurity framework and asked the agency to connect its landmark cybersecurity framework to the performance goals set by the Biden administration rather than to drastically alter or create new standards and guidance. It remains to be seen how the agency will respond. NIST is seeking comment until June 20th of 2022 on a cybersecurity framework for satellite ground systems in positioning, timing, and navigation, or PNT. The draft document entitled Satellite Ground Segment, Applying the Cybersecurity Framework to Assure Satellite Command and Control, applies the NIST cybersecurity framework to the ground segment with an emphasis on the command and control of the satellite, buses, and payloads to support the goals of Space Policy Directive Space Policy Directive 5 for securing space. It is designed to be foundational guidance as part of the risk management program to help organizations manage cybersecurity risks to systems, and it is not meant to issue mandatory practices or regulations. NIST is launching a new prize competition series to advance the use of unmanned aircraft systems by first responders for indoor search and rescue operations. The First Responder UAS Indoor Challenge is the agency's 6th prize competition aimed at advancing the use of unmanned aircraft systems indoors for first responders' situational awareness. In the challenge, competitors will design, build, and fly a cost-effective, easily flyable drone solution to help search and rescue teams better gain situational awareness prior to entering a building. Competitors will tackle difficulties in operating UAS indoors where GPS is unavailable, lighting is limited, and structural integrity is compromised. The competition will begin accepting entries April 27th, which was last week, with multiple stages running through June of 2023. NIST has published 2 final documents on patch management. The first, entitled Special Publication 840 Revision 4, a Guide to Enterprise Patch Management Planning, Preventative Maintenance for Technology, instructs organizational leadership, business owners, and security or technology management groups on the creation and implementation of strategies for simplifying and running patches and decreasing risks related to performing computer preventative maintenance efforts. The agency also published SP 1831 entitled Improving Enterprise Patching for General IT Systems, Utilizing Existing Tools and Performing Processes in Better Ways. This second publication offers more information on how to enhance the use of patching capabilities, building upon 840 Rev 3 and 4's work. The release also addresses patching situations where commercial tools were used for routine and emergency maintenance, as well as presents temporary patching alternatives. The Nist NCCOE has released 3 publications on trusted cloud and hardware-enabled security. The first, Nist SP 1819, Trusted Cloud Security Practice Guide for VM Hardware Hybrid Cloud Infrastructure as a Service, or IaaS environments, presents an example of a trusted hybrid cloud solution that demonstrates how trusted compute pools leveraging hardware roots of trust can provide the necessary security capabilities for cloud workloads in addition to protecting the virtualization and application layers. Nist IR 8320B, Hardware-Enabled Security Policy-Based Governance in Trusted Container Platforms, explains an approach based on hardware-enabled security techniques and technologies for safeguarding container deployments in multi-tenant cloud environments. And finally, Nist IR 8320C, Hardware-Enabled Security Machine Identity Management and Protection, presents an approach for overcoming security challenges associated with creating, managing, and protecting machine identities such as cryptographic keys throughout their lifecycle. The Nist NCCOE has also published a report that explores the issues surrounding traceability and the role that blockchain and related technologies may be able to play to improve supply chain traceability. It includes several case studies and explains how tamper-evident and tamper-resistant information sharing technologies can help create a supply chain ecosystem that assures the traceability of products. It also explores how tracked provenance of products, which is defined as the chronology of the origin, development, ownership, location, and changes to a system or system components and associated data, could be leveraged to improve supply chain security. That Nist publication is NISTIR 8419. Nist is expected to release several post-quantum cryptographic standards in response to current discussions and recent legislation around quantum cryptography and concerns of quantum computing. Nist's expected release of standards will likely be within the next few weeks to few months. There's a bit of speculation right now due to some ambiguity regarding one of the quantum algorithms, which ICIT may be talking about in a future location, but it may be premature to issue some definitive standards at this time. But that's up to Nist, and we'll see when they release the standard what they have. Regardless, the post-quantum cryptography standards are expected to address public key signatures and exchange algorithms to combat potential quantum computing security risks. Nist's Hollings Manufacturing Extension Partnership has reported a positive impact. The program announced results of its fiscal year 2021 manufacturing client survey, as well as the impacts of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or CARES Act, funding through January of 2022. The MIP program supports the competitiveness of US-based manufacturing by ensuring that manufacturing technologies, processes, and services are more accessible to small and medium-sized critical manufacturing organizations through MEP centers in all 50 US states and Puerto Rico. According to the survey, for every $1 of federal investment in fiscal year of 2021, the MEP national network generated about $26 in new sales growth and $34 in new client investment. This translates into about $14.4 billion in new and retained sales for US manufacturers. The network also created or retained one manufacturing job for every $1,193 of federal investment. This is important for our critical manufacturing sector, as well as important due to cybersecurity risks that are arising with regards to critical manufacturing and our supply chain risk. Moving on, the Office of Management and Budget received federal agencies' initial Zero Trust and Modernization plans at the beginning of April. The plans describe how each agency proposes to adopt various Zero Trust approaches and capabilities by the end of fiscal year 2024, which was a goal set by the White House's Zero Trust strategy released in January of 2022. OMB also quietly redesignated the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM, as the HR Quality Services Management Office, or QSMO, for civilian human resources transactions ranging from enterprise resource planning platforms to point solutions. This went into effect March 30th of 2022 after finding the agency better suited to stand up a modern IT solutions marketplace that included commercial offerings. OPM has spent the last 6 months on the migration and is preparing to inventory agencies' HR, IT systems, and modernization roadmaps. The State Department is seeking information on 6 individuals believed to have been involved in the 2017 criminal conspiracy to infect computers worldwide with the NotPetya destructive malware. The campaign is attributed with more than $1 billion in damages to US systems. An up to $10 million reward is part of the State Department's Rewards for Justice program and extends beyond just the 6 Russian intelligence hackers that are allegedly responsible for NotPetya to, quote, any person who, while acting at the direction or under the control of a foreign government, participates in malicious cyber activities against US critical infrastructure. The State Department identified the suspects as GRU officers. I apologize, I am not going to even try to pronounce a number of these names, but you can read them either in the ICIT reports or on the State Department website in the advisory. It identifies the actors as members of the Sandworm APT unit of Russian intelligence and describes them as members of a conspiracy that deployed destructive malware and took over disruptive actions for the strategic benefit of Russia through unauthorized access to victim computers. Just as a note, Sandworm is one of the major 3 or the top 3 Russian APTs. You can read more about them in a number of the ICIT white papers, including our Digital Maskirovka paper from about a month ago. And finally, for agency updates for this month, thank you for bearing with me. The White House, along with all European Union member states and 32 non-EU countries, announced a declaration for the future of the internet, which lays out priorities for an open, free, global, interoperable, reliable, and secure internet. It highlights goals like affordability, net neutrality, and removing illegal content without curtailing free expression. The White House, the 3-page declaration offers a broad vision of the internet, as well as a mix of more specific issues for its 61 signatories, The White House itself has issued its own fact sheet, as well as a transcription of the roundtable discussion with National Cyber Director Chris Inglis and foreign dignitaries following the declaration. Moving on to legislation for this month. We are currently in the 117th Congress, which reigns from January 3rd of last year to January 3rd of next year. There are currently around 13,569 bills introduced to Congress, of which we expect overall around 7% to become laws. Of those, 362 deal with cybersecurity. That includes both resolutions and reintroductions. And around 30 of those bills so far have been enacted, which is a little bit higher than the average. ICIT is currently tracking 228 unique pieces of legislation, removing the duplicates and resolutions, which relate to critical infrastructure technology and cybersecurity. This month, as you can see, areas such as Homeland Security and public health were main focuses of legislation, whereas areas such as election security and privacy were less focused on. We have 8 new bills. This month we actually, I think it's the first month in a long time where the majority of the bills, a little over half, are actually updates to prior pieces of legislation. And we had an even split of bills introduced between the House and the Senate. Jumping on in, HR 4373 makes appropriations for the Department of State, Foreign Operations, and related programs for the fiscal year ending October 30th of 2022. The bill requires the Secretary of State and U.S. Aid Administrator to strengthen records management, secure communication networks, and increase related cybersecurity protections. This bill was enacted and incorporated into HR 2471, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022. S658 authorizes the Secretary of Homeland Security to work with the National Cybersecurity Preparedness Consortium for training to provide training and education to state, tribal, and local first responders and officials specifically for preparing for and responding to cybersecurity risks and incidents, to develop and update curriculum utilizing existing training and educational programs, to provide technical assistance services, training and education, and to build sustainable capabilities in support of and preparedness for and response to cybersecurity risks and incidents, including threats and acts of terrorism, to conduct cross-sector cybersecurity training, including simulation exercises, to help states, tribal organizations, and communities develop cybersecurity information sharing programs, to help incorporate cybersecurity risk and incident prevention and response programs, and to assist state governments and tribal organizations in developing cybersecurity plans. HR 6387 amends the Homeland Security Act of 2002 to establish a school security coordinating council, which includes the Undersecretary for Strategy, Policy, and Plans, the Director of CISA, the Administrator of FEMA, the Director of the Secret Service, the Executive Director of the Office of Academic Engagement, the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs, and any other official of the department that the Secretary deems appropriate. We did not have any updates this month on election reform. Under Energy, HR 7569 directs the Secretary of Energy to establish a program to provide financial assistance to graduate students and postdoctoral researchers who are pursuing certain courses of study relating to cybersecurity and energy infrastructure. S4000 requires the establishment of a cybersecurity information sharing agreements between DHS and Congress. The bill requires the Secretary of Homeland Security, in consultation with other appropriate executive agencies and officials, to establish one or more cybersecurity information sharing agreements with the Sergeant at Arms and Doorkeeper of the Senate and the Chief Administrative Officer of the House of Representatives to ensure robust collaboration between the executive branch and Congress on federal cybersecurity. The parties to a cybersecurity information sharing agreement will jointly develop elements of the agreement, such as the direct and timely sharing of technical indicators and contextual information of cyber threats and vulnerabilities, the direct and timely sharing of classified and unclassified reports on cyber threats and activities, and the seating of cybersecurity personnel of the Senate and House of Representatives at cybersecurity operations centers. Within 120 days after the date of enactment of the bill, if it passes, and periodically thereafter, the Secretary of Homeland Security will brief the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs and the Committee on Rules and Administration of the Senate and the Committee on Homeland Security and the Committee on House Administration of the House of Representatives on the status and implementation of the agreements. HR 4476 establishes the DHS Trade and Economic Security Council and the position of the Assistant Secretary for Trade and Economic Security within DHS. The Assistant Secretary for Trade and Economic Security would oversee the activities and enhancements of requirements for supply chain mapping, not otherwise assigned by law or by the Secretary to another officer, and the assessments and reports to Congress related to critical economic security domains. They would also serve as the executive for the department on the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, or CFIUS, the Committee for the Assessment on Foreign Participation in the United States Telecommunications Services Sector, and the Federal Acquisition Security Council, in addition to any other position on such council occupied by a representative of CISA of the department. They would coordinate with stakeholders in federal departments and agencies and with non-government entities with trade and economic security interests, authorities, and responsibilities, and they would perform additional duties as the Secretary or the Undersecretary of Strategy, Policy, and Plans may prescribe. HR 7299 requires the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to obtain an independent cybersecurity assessment of information systems of the VA within 60 days after the enactment of the bill. The Secretary of the VA is directed to enter into an agreement with a federally funded research and development center to provide an independent cybersecurity assessment of 3 to 10 high-impact information systems ranging from on-premise, remote, cloud-based, and mobile information systems and devices used by or in support of department activities. The independent cybersecurity assessment would gauge the effectiveness of the information security program and information security management system of the department and include a detailed analysis of the ability of the department to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information systems and devices, and an audit of the use of information technology systems, devices, and services by employees and contractors of the department who do so without elements of the department that are responsible for information technology, without the department knowing or approving of the use. It would also evaluate the department's ability to protect against APTs, ransomware, denial of service, insider threats, whether and other cyber attacks, and within 120 days after passing the bill, the Secretary would submit to Congress a plan to address the findings of the assessment, which would include a cost estimate for implementing the plan, a timeline, and other elements deemed appropriate. We did not have any updates in the financial space for this month. Under our Homeland Security category, HR 4977 and at the accompanying S2629 tasked the Attorney General with establishing a category in the National Incident based reporting system or any successive system for the collection of cybercrime and cyber-enabled crime reports from federal, state, and local officials. They also task the director of the Bureau of Justice Statistics in coordination with the director of the Bureau of the Census to include questions relating to cybercrime victimization in the National Crime Victimization Survey. Finally, the bills require the Comptroller General of the United States to submit to Congress a report that assesses the effectiveness of reporting mechanisms for cybercrime and cyber-enabled crime, and the disparities in reporting data between data relating to cybercrime and cyber-enabled crime and other types of crime data. HR 6930 and S 3838 authorize the confiscation of property of certain Russian persons subject to sanctions imposed by the United States and the use of that property for the benefit of the people of Ukraine. One allocation of the assets specified in the bill is to bolster cybersecurity capabilities in the elected government of Ukraine or non-governmental organizations in Ukraine. For more information on the Russian Digital Maskarova Cyber Physical Strategy, please see the ICIT March 2022 white paper entitled Returning to the Wilderness of Mirrors, How Great Power Competition and Cyber Warfare Could Precipitate a Digital Age Cold War. HR 923 supports the independent sovereignty and territorial integrity of Georgia. Within the bill, Section 103 details the United States cybersecurity cooperation with Georgia and asks the Secretary of State to offer assistance to improve the cybersecurity posture of the country by providing them with support that may be necessary to secure government computer networks from malicious cyber intrusions, particularly such networks that defend the critical infrastructure, provide Georgia with support in reducing reliance on Russian information and communication technology, and assist the country to build its capacity, expand cybersecurity information sharing, and cooperate on international cyberspace efforts. Within 180 days after the enactment of the bill, the Secretary of State would submit a report on United States cybersecurity cooperation with the Republic to the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the House of Representatives and the Committee on Foreign Relations of the Senate. The report would include U.S. efforts to strengthen Georgia's ability to prevent, mitigate, and respond to cyber incidents, including through training, education, technical assistance, capacity building, and cybersecurity risk management strategies, the potential for new areas of collaboration and mutual assistance between the U.S. and Georgia to address shared cyber challenges, including cybercrime, critical infrastructure protection, and resilience against automated distributed threats, and NATO's efforts to help Georgia develop technical capabilities to counter cyber threats. We did not have any updates this month in the privacy space. Within public health, S2123 establishes a federal clearinghouse on safety security best practices for faith-based organizations and houses of worship. Section 6 of the bill tasks the Secretary of Homeland Security with developing and including a separate section for other resources on the clearinghouse website that provides a centralized list of available points of contact to seek assistance in grant applications and carrying out the best practices, cybersecurity best practices, which would include a list of contact information to reach DHS personnel to assist with grant-related questions, the applicable CISA contact information to connect houses of worship with protective security advisors, contact information for all department fusion centers that are listed by the Department of State, information on the If You See Something, Say Something campaign of the department, and other appropriate contacts. S3904 aims to enhance the cybersecurity of the healthcare and public health sector. The bill requires CISA to enter into agreement as appropriate with HHS to improve the cybersecurity in the space. It also asks CISA to coordinate the development of product specifics to the needs of the sector entities and the sharing information related to share information related to cyber threat indicators and appropriate defensive measures. CISA would make resources available to information sharing and analysis organizations, information sharing and analysis centers, and non-federal entities that are receiving information shared through programs managed by HHS. The cybersecurity advisors and cybersecurity state coordinators of CISA would, in coordination with appropriate private sector healthcare experts, provide training to healthcare and public health sector asset owners and operators on cybersecurity risks to the sector and assets within the sector, and ways to mitigate the risks to information systems within the sector. Within 1 year after passing the bill, the director of CISA, in consultation with the Secretary of HHS, would conduct a study and issue a report that would include an analysis of how identified cybersecurity risks specifically impact the sector, including the impact on rural and small and medium-sized healthcare assets. It would also include an evaluation of the challenges within the healthcare sector, such as securing data, updating information systems owned, leased, or relied upon, securing medical devices and equipment, preventing the exploitation of sensitive patient health information, electronic health records, implementing cybersecurity protocols, and responding to data breaches or cyber attacks. It would also include an evaluation of best practices for the deployment of trained cybersecurity advisors and cybersecurity state coordinators of the agency in the healthcare space before, during, and after breaches or cyber attacks. And it would include an assessment of relevant healthcare cybersecurity workforce shortages, and it would follow up within 120 days with a report and a briefing on the status of the study to the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, and the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs of the Senate, and the Committee on Energy and Commerce, and the Committee on Homeland Security of the House. S3983 amends the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to require, for purposes of ensuring cybersecurity, the inclusion in any pre-market submission for a cyber device of information to demonstrate a reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness throughout the life cycle of the cyber device. For purposes of ensuring cybersecurity throughout the life cycle of a device, any person who submits a pre-market submission for a device would have to include such information as cybersecurity to the Secretary of HHS. This would include minimal cybersecurity requirements set by the Secretary, such as implementing a plan to appropriately monitor, identify, and address in a reasonable time post-market cybersecurity vulnerabilities and exploits, developing a plan of procedures for coordinated vulnerability disclosure to be a part of submissions to the FDA, collecting and maintaining information required by the Secretary of HHS to demonstrate a reasonable assurance of the safety and effectiveness of the device, designing, developing, and maintaining processes and procedures to make available updates and patches to the device and related systems throughout the life cycle, furnishing the Secretary of HHS with a software bill of materials, including commercial, open source, and off-the-shelf software components that would be provided to users, and other things deemed appropriate by the Secretary. In making a determination of substantial equivalence for the cyber device, the Secretary may establish exemptions to the requirements. They could find the cybersecurity information on the device described in the relevant pre-market submission inadequate, or they could issue a non-substantial equivalence determination based on the findings. S3949 reauthorizes the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000 and allocates $3.5 million of additional funds for fiscal year 2020, each fiscal year 2022 to 2027, bringing the total for each year to $23 million, of which $5 million is authorized to be appropriated for the National Human Trafficking Hotline and for cybersecurity and public education campaigns in consultation with the Secretary of DHS. These would help with identifying and responding to the needs in cases of human trafficking while maintaining cybersecurity protections. HR 7573 and 3593, amend Title 11 and Title 18 of the Social Security Act to extend certain telehealth services covered by Medicare and to evaluate the impact of telehealth services on Medicare beneficiaries. The bill requires the Secretary of HHS to conduct a study and submit to the Committee on Energy and Commerce and the Committee on Ways and Means of the House of Representatives and the Committee on Finance of the Senate an interim report on any changes made to the provision or availability of telehealth services under Part A and B of Title 18 of the Social Security Act, which shall include, among other things, a description of any privacy concerns with respect to the furnishing of telehealth services, such as cybersecurity or ransomware concerns. They would include a description of any actions taken by the Secretary acting through health sector cybersecurity coordination centers or other relevant agencies and departments, and during such emergency periods to assist healthcare providers to secure telecommunication systems. Moving on, and almost done, I promise. HR 4521 addresses U.S. technology and communications, foreign relations and national security, domestic manufacturing, education, trade, and other matters. This is a very large bill. We're only going to hit on the high notes here. There is a more extensive write-up included in the members' reports. Among other provisions, the bill includes providing funding for fiscal year 2022 to 2026 to support U.S. semiconductor manufacturing, research and development, and supply chain security, providing funding for wireless supply chain innovation, establishing a Directorate for Technology and Innovation in the National Science Foundation, extending through 2025 the authority of NASA to lease its non-excess real property or related personal property, authorizing various programs and policies related to space exploration, authorizing various international affairs programs and activities, including foreign assistance for the Indo-Pacific region, requiring federal infrastructure programs to provide for the use of materials produced in the United States, imposing sanctions on China for cybersecurity and human rights abuses, requiring the Department of HHS to consider national security risks associated with sensitive genetic information, including initiatives related to elementary and secondary education, including those that increase computer science education, containing provisions related to higher education, including those reauthorizing through 2027 international education programs and addressing China's influence on higher education, modifying and expanding the schedule for graduate merger filing fees, prohibiting federal funding for international institutes of specific types, requiring U.S. trade representatives to take certain actions related to digital trade and censorship practices, and extending through 2027 generalized system preferences. Some cybersecurity highlights that are maybe a little more specific and a little less partisan include Section 2305, which amends the Nist Act to insert a clause that would add the consideration of institutes of higher education cybersecurity. Section 2676 amends Section 2301 of Title 51 to include the responsibility to update and improve the cybersecurity of NASA space assets and supporting infrastructure. Section 3122 establishes a program to be known as the Digital Connectivity and Cybersecurity Partnership, which deals with our relationships with international entities. Section 3136 combats disinformation by tasking the U.S. Agency for Global Media with expanding existing training and partnership programs. Title II of Provision D incorporates the Advancing American AI Act and the Cyber Response and Recovery Act, both of which are covered in our members' legislative reports. Section 5203 details the imposition of sanctions with respect to activities of the People's Republic of China, undermining cybersecurity, including cyber attacks on the US government and private sector networks. Again, this is a pretty extensive bill, and a lot of things appear to have been incorporated into it. And finally, for this month, S3511, the Satellite Cybersecurity Act, requires the Comptroller General of the United States to conduct a study on the actions of the federal government has taken to support the cybersecurity of commercial satellite systems, including as part of any action to address the cybersecurity of critical infrastructure sectors. It tasks the Comptroller General with conducting a study and presenting it to Congress, which evaluates the effectiveness of efforts of federal government on improving the cybersecurity of commercial satellite systems, the resources available to the public by federal agencies to address cybersecurity threats to commercial satellite systems, assessing the extent to which commercial satellite systems are reliant on or relied on by critical infrastructure, and an analysis of how commercial satellite systems and the threats to those systems are integrated into federal and non-federal critical infrastructure risk analyses and protection plans, evaluating the extent to which federal agencies are reliant on commercial satellite systems and how federal agencies mitigate those cybersecurity risks, and assessing the extent to which federal agencies coordinate or duplicate authorities and take other actions focused on the cybersecurity of commercial satellite systems. Thank you for bearing with me. This concludes the ICIT April 2022 Legislation and Federal Agencies Initiatives webcast. Please keep an eye out for an upcoming ICIT Fellows Insights webcast that we will be sending out to members and posting publicly shortly thereafter. This is a roundtable discussion between our fellows and pertains to the topic for this quarter pertains to what more legislators and agencies can do to combat, mitigate, and deter cyber attacks that are incited by international and geopolitical conflicts. So please keep an eye out either in your inbox if you're a member or via our digital library and eBlast if you are not currently an individual member. Thank you and have a good day.